I hadn't planned on joining my brother's friends for their weekend trip, but Chase called me the night before and insisted they had an extra seat. His voice had carried the kind of forced enthusiasm that meant he was trying to fix something, maybe my too quiet week, maybe his own guilt for leaving me out of things lately. By the time morning came, I found myself standing on the curb with a small backpack, watching a dusty SUV pull up and three unfamiliar faces staring back at me. The first to step out was Logan Mercer, tall and unmistakably self-assured, with a smile that warmed the cold December air. He greeted me like we had known each other for years, and I immediately understood why my brother admired him. His expression shifted only slightly when he learned Chase couldn't join us because of a shift swap gone wrong, but he didn't let the disappointment linger. Next was Aiden Brooks, a quieter observer with sharp eyes that seemed to absorb everything without judgment. He offered me a hand and a simple nod. And last was Jonah, who was mostly focused on the playlist he was curating for the drive. They all seemed comfortable with one another, an easy rhythm I felt I might disrupt simply by existing. Still, Logan insisted I sit up front, claiming I looked like someone who needed the better view, and even if he meant it jokingly, I appreciated it. The drive began with upbeat music and road trip chatter, but over time, the topics drifted toward relationships, the future, and the kind of half-serious conversations people only have when trapped in a moving car for hours. I learned that Aiden was studying architecture, Jonah worked in digital marketing, and Logan seemed to live in a world where every plan was fluid and every decision only half permanent. Somewhere between small towns and long stretches of quiet highway, Logan mentioned his boyfriend, Mason Hale, in a tone that felt practiced, as if he had repeated the name so many times it no longer carried the weight it once had. He spoke warmly, but with an undercurrent of strain, like someone trying to defend a story that had started falling apart. When Mason called, Logan's voice softened but his eyes hardened, and by the time the call ended, he stared out the window with a restless jaw. No one commented on it, though I sensed both Aiden and I were curious for different reasons. The weather shifted as we moved deeper into the mountains. Clouds gathered, dense and charcoal gray, dragging the afternoon into an early dusk. Logan kept checking the GPS, then the sky, then the GPS again. He joked about being cursed with terrible luck during trips, but the unease in his laugh betrayed him. When the first flurry of snow hit the windshield, Jonah groaned loudly. Of course, he muttered. Every time we leave town as a group, nature tries to kill us. The storm escalated quicker than any of us expected. The roads grew slick, visibility dropped, and traffic slowed to a crawl. Aiden leaned over between the seats, reading updates on his phone. "They're closing the mountain pass," he announced. "We're not getting through tonight." Logan exhaled sharply, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel as he searched for an alternative route. The GPS offered nothing helpful, only detours that stretched through remote areas or warnings about worsening conditions. Eventually, he pulled the car over, the hazard lights blinking weakly against the swirling snow. "We need to find a place to stop," he said. "There's a small town 10 minutes back. It'll have something. Hopefully." No one argued. The storm had grown too fierce for optimism. When we rolled into the town, its streets were almost empty except for a few cars crawling through the snow. A coffee shop sign flickered, and a faded motel stood near the edge of the road, glowing like a lifeline. Logan turned the SUV toward it without hesitation. The building wasn't glamorous, chipped paint, a neon vacancy sign that buzzed unevenly, but it was shelter, and that was enough. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of old carpet and brewed tea. A middle-aged woman behind the desk informed us, with an apologetic shrug, that only 2 rooms remained. Aiden immediately claimed one room with Jonah, arguing that Logan should take the smaller bed because he hogs too much space. Logan threw a snowball of sarcasm back at him, but it dissolved quickly when the woman handed him the last key. "Looks like it's you and me," Logan said, turning to me with a lopsided grin that carried more warmth than the heater humming in the corner. My stomach tightened, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar flutter that had been lingering around him all day. Sharing a room with someone like Logan felt strangely intimate, even if nothing meaningful had happened. I told myself not to overthink it. That we trudged through the snow to our room, the icy air burning our lungs. Logan unlocked the door, letting out a soft whistle at the vintage decor. The room was small, with 2 beds separated by a wooden nightstand and a single lamp casting a soft amber glow. The sheets looked clean enough, and the heater rattled like it was fighting for its life, but the space felt safe, or at least safe enough. As we unpacked the essentials, spare clothes, chargers, the sense of exhaustion that had grown heavier by the minute, Logan looked out the frosted window. Snow fell thickly, illuminated by the parking lot lights, swirling like powdered glass in the wind. This wasn't the plan, he murmured, more to himself than to me. But maybe it's not the worst thing. I didn't know what he meant, but something in his tone softened the air between us. He turned toward me with a quieter expression, almost thoughtful. For the first time that day, he didn't seem like the vibrant, confident friend of my brother. He seemed human, uncertain, searching. That I sat on my bed and pulled off my boots, listening as he did the same. The storm outside raged on, muffling the world, isolating us in a pocket of warmth and unsaid words. We'll get through tomorrow, Logan said finally, stretching out with a tired sigh. Tonight, let's just survive this place. He laughed lightly, but his eyes held something deeper, something unspoken. I didn't press him for answers. Instead, I settled into the quiet, letting the moment breathe between us, and though the room was small, it felt impossibly large with all the possibilities it contained. The storm gave no sign of stopping, and somewhere in that flickering quiet, I realized the night wasn't done shaping the story we had stumbled into. The room settled into a hush after the others disappeared behind their door. Only the low hum of the heater and the relentless wind outside filled the silence. Logan Mercer sat on the edge of his bed, elbows resting on his knees, staring at the floor as though it might offer answers he'd been avoiding all day. I watched him from my side of the room, pretending to adjust my backpack, waiting for the tightness in the air to ease. He finally exhaled, long and weary. Mason texted, he said, without looking up. He wants to talk tonight. There was a fragility in his voice I hadn't heard before, not even during the tense phone call in the car. I didn't know what to say, so I offered the gentlest truth I could. You don't have to talk if you're not ready. Logan chuckled softly, not from humor but from resignation. I never seem to do things when I'm ready. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. That's kind of the problem. The storm outside intensified, snow tapping against the window like impatient fingers. The room's amber light deepened the shadows, creating an atmosphere that felt narrow yet strangely intimate. When Logan lifted his head, his eyes lingered on me with an expression that made the distance between our beds feel smaller than a breath. It's weird, he said quietly. I didn't expect to talk to you this much today. I smiled at the understatement. We've barely known each other 12 hours. Exactly. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated but thoughtful. But you listen. I don't think I realized how much I needed that. He didn't say it flirtatiously. He said it like someone who had been walking a long road alone. To shift the heaviness, I asked, how long have you two been together? 3 years, he answered. Or, 2 good years and 1 long, confusing one. His shoulders sank. We used to feel like a team. Lately it's like we're just holding on to history we don't know how to let go of. Across the room, the heater gave a loud clank, almost as if in protest to the rising tension. Logan smiled at the noise, then his expression softened into something introspective. I don't think I've said that out loud before. I hesitated before speaking, aware of the delicate line between comforting someone and crossing into something we couldn't take back. Sometimes saying it helps you see it more clearly. He looked at me again, really looked, with an expression that seemed to search for understanding, permission, or maybe relief. But before either of us could address the shift in the air, his phone buzzed sharply. The screen lit up with Mason's name. Logan stared at it without moving. You can answer if you want, I murmured. I don't know what he wants tonight, Logan admitted. And I don't know what I can give him. The phone buzzed again before falling silent. Logan set it face down on the nightstand, as if forcing himself to breathe. The room felt warmer after that, not from the heater but from the vulnerability hovering between us. To break the tension, I asked about their relationship, where they met, what the early days were like, what changed. Logan spoke in slow, unguarded sentences, describing memories that once held joy but now felt faded around the edges. His expressions shifted with each recollection, soft nostalgia, fatigue, faint resentment, and finally a quiet sorrow. "It wasn't always complicated," he said. "We used to talk about everything. Now we talk around things. Like we're keeping each other from the truth." He paused, his gaze settling on me. "I didn't mean for you to hear all this. I don't mind. I know you don't." His voice was softer now, low enough that the storm itself had to pause to listen. "That we talked like that for a long time, not about Mason anymore, but about ourselves." Logan shared pieces of his life he claimed he never talked about, his fear of disappointing people, the pressure he felt to always appear put together, the loneliness that followed him even when surrounded by friends. I shared my own quieter insecurities in return, how I often felt overshadowed by my own brother, how I hadn't found my place yet, how every connection I'd tried to build felt temporary. The more we spoke, the more the distance between our beds seemed symbolic rather than physical. Logan shifted, sitting back against his headboard, legs stretched out. I mirrored him without realizing it, leaning into my pillow as the conversation settled into an unexpectedly natural rhythm. At one point, the lights flickered. We both froze, glancing up. "Great," he said. "Just what this night needed, a power outage." The room dipped into darkness for 2 seconds before the lights flicked back on, dimmer than before. Logan laughed nervously, but the interruption left a charged quiet in its wake. "Are you okay?" I asked, noticing the tension in his posture. That he nodded, but his eyes carried a depth that contradicted it. "It's not the storm. It's everything else." The heater sputtered again. Wind pressed against the window. And in the dimness, Logan's face looked caught between clarity and conflict. That he lowered his voice. "Evan, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're standing in the wrong place, but at the right time?" I didn't breathe for a moment. Because yes, that was exactly how tonight felt, like the universe had placed us here intentionally, yet dared us not to interpret it the wrong way. "I think," I said carefully, "sometimes life puts people in the same room because they need to understand something about themselves." Logan's eyes held mine. "What do you think we're supposed to understand?" Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door, abrupt, sharp, and unintentionally breaking the moment. Logan blinked, startled. I sat up straighter, heartbeat thudding with a mix of relief and disappointment. Aiden's voice came through the door. "You guys okay?" "Lights flickered over here." "We're good," Logan called back. "Just talking." "All right. Good night." His footsteps faded, leaving silence behind like a curtain falling. Logan leaned back, exhaling with a shaky laugh. I don't know what I was about to say. But I did. And the weight of the unsaid lingered between us. He reached for his phone again, hesitated, then placed it back down untouched. "Not tonight," he whispered. The storm roared. The room fell still, and somehow, in all that restless quiet, I knew the night had shifted something in both of us, something neither of us was prepared to name yet, but neither of us could ignore anymore. Morning arrived wrapped in mist. The lake looked silver and still, a mirror without reflection. I woke to the faint creak of boards downstairs and the smell of coffee drifting through the hall. For a moment, I didn't move. The events of the night before, Mark's lingering gaze, the quiet tension, hung like fog in my mind. When I finally went down, my father was outside with Tom, both already dressed for chores. David sat at the counter, newspaper spread before him, his bare feet tapping softly on the floor. Mark stood near the window, stirring sugar into his mug. He turned as I entered, that same steady calm behind his eyes. "Morning, Ethan," he said. "Sleep well?" "Mostly." "Good." He smiled faintly, like the word carried more weight than it should. The day unfolded in slow fragments. My father and Tom repaired a loose section of dock, their laughter echoing over the water. David cleaned fishing rods, humming tunelessly. Mark joined me near the boathouse, where we sorted through tangled ropes and rusted hooks. The air smelled of lakeweed and sun-warmed pine. "You used to come here often?" I asked. That he nodded. Every summer, for a while. Your dad, me, David, Tom. We thought the world began and ended at this lake. I looked at him. And now? Now the world feels smaller. He smiled without looking up. But memories make good company when the noise dies down. Something about the way he said it stayed with me, the hint of weariness behind the ease. His eyes were soft, but there was a gravity there, like he was speaking from a place far older than his years. By noon, the sun broke through, scattering gold across the water. We took the boat out, my father steering, Tom telling stories, David lounging with his feet over the edge. Mark sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders brushed when the boat tilted. Each touch, however small, seemed to last a beat too long that my father didn't notice, or pretended not to. He talked about old times, names I didn't know, jokes that belonged to another generation. I laughed when expected, but the laughter didn't belong to me. At one point, Mark leaned closer and said quietly, "He doesn't see you clearly, does he?" I turned toward him, startled. "What do you mean?" "He looks at you and still sees a boy. But you've grown in ways he doesn't understand." I didn't answer. The air between us tightened, wordless but full. Later, when we returned, my father disappeared into the shed with Tom, leaving David to light the evening fire. Mark lingered near the porch, polishing a glass absently. "You don't talk much," he said after a while. "I guess I learned from my dad." He chuckled softly. "Maybe. But sometimes silence says more than words." The comment struck deeper than I expected. There was no flirtation in his tone, no teasing, just quiet observation. It made me feel seen in a way that was almost uncomfortable. When dinner came, conversation flowed like warm current, drinks poured, plates passed, laughter rebounding through the room. My father grew louder with every glass, the way men do when they mistake volume for control. Mark, in contrast, spoke sparingly. Each word deliberate, each glance precise. I found myself watching him, the curve of his hand around the glass, the way his voice softened when he addressed me. At one point, David leaned across the table and said, "You look just like your father did at your age, Ethan. Maybe a little less trouble, though." "Don't bet on it," Tom added, earning another round of laughter, but Mark's gaze didn't join the humor. He looked at me for a long moment, then down at his drink. The noise around us faded, and for a breath, it felt like there were only two people in that room. When the plates cleared, the others drifted toward the fire pit outside. The night was thick with the smell of rain, clouds rolling in over the lake. My father sat with Tom and David, trading stories too loud for the calm that surrounded them. Mark stayed behind, collecting bottles, his movements unhurried. "Storm's coming," he said. "I know." He nodded toward the window. "You can feel it in the air before it arrives, like everything's holding its breath." I stood beside him, close enough to hear the low rhythm of his breathing. The rain began as a whisper on the roof, then gathered strength, rattling against the glass. Lightning flared across the lake, white and brief. The power flickered once and died. The room fell into darkness, broken only by the faint glow from the fireplace outside. "Guess we're on candle duty," Mark said quietly. He found a box on the shelf, lit a single wick. The small flame painted his face in shifting gold, the light softening the sharpness of his features. For a while, we didn't speak. The silence wasn't empty, it pulsed with something fragile, unspoken. Finally, he said, "You remind me of myself at your age." I glanced up. "That's supposed to be a compliment?" He smiled faintly. "Depends who's asking." I laughed, though it came out shaky. He turned to the window again, rain streaking down the glass like veins. "Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who never really see us," he said. "And sometimes the ones who do, aren't supposed to." The words lingered, low and dangerous. Before I could respond, the screen door opened and David's voice called out, "Mark, you hiding from the storm?" He turned away, the moment breaking cleanly, like glass underfoot. "Just waiting for it to pass," he answered. David grinned, stepping inside with a towel draped over his shoulders. "Good luck with that. It's going all night." They spoke easily, old friends resettling into rhythm. I stood back, caught between presence and retreat, unsure which direction to choose, when the lightning flashed again. Mark's eyes met mine across the dim room. There was no smile this time, just an acknowledgement, quiet and deliberate. Outside, thunder rolled across the lake. Inside, laughter rose again, masking what had almost been said. Hours later, after the others had drifted to bed, I found myself awake in the dark. The rain still pressed against the roof, soft and steady. Somewhere below, footsteps moved lightly, then stopped. For a moment, I thought of going down, to speak, to ask, to understand, but I stayed where I was, caught between fear and longing. The lake house groaned with the weight of the storm, its walls whispering with wind and memory. That I closed my eyes, knowing something irreversible had begun. Though neither of us had crossed any line, something had shifted in the quiet between us. And even through the noise of the storm, I could still hear Mark's voice. Low, patient, dangerous in its truth. Sometimes the ones who see us aren't supposed to.